The border systems of the Krathon Empire stretched across space like a net of steel and fire. Their dominance had lasted for 3,000 years, unchallenged by any force in the known galaxy. 847 star systems bent to their rule, and their fleets numbered in the tens of thousands. No species had ever dared to contest their claim to the stars. High Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of the warship Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms crossed behind his back as he surveyed the tactical displays. The Krathon were a proud species, their chitinous bodies evolved for war, their minds shaped by conquest. For Vexthor, who had served in the military for 200 years, every day brought the same certainty. The Empire was eternal. The Empire was absolute. But on this particular day, something unusual appeared on the sensors. Science Officer Kellenes approached the commander with hesitation in her movements. She was young for her position, only 70 years in service, but her analytical mind had earned her the role. "High Commander, we have detected an anomaly in Sector 749. Vexthor did not turn from the display. "What kind of anomaly?" "A spatial distortion. It appears and disappears from our sensors without pattern. The automated systems classified it as equipment malfunction, but I have verified the readings personally. The distortion is real." Now Vexthor turned. His compound eyes focused on the young officer with the intensity that had made him famous throughout the fleet. "How long has this been occurring?" Kellenes touched the control pad mounted on her forearm, calling up the data. 3 standard cycles, Commander. The distortion has been moving through our restricted military zones." Silence fell across the bridge. The crew had heard those words, and they understood the implications. Nothing moved through Krathon military space undetected. Their sensor networks were designed to track objects smaller than a shuttle across light years of distance. For something to evade detection for 3 full cycles was beyond impossible. "Show me the pattern," Vexthor commanded. The main display shifted to show a star chart. Red dots appeared, marking the locations where the distortion had been detected. They formed a line that cut directly through some of the most heavily defended areas of Empire space: weapons testing ranges, fleet assembly points, shipyards constructing the next generation of warships. "This is no natural phenomenon," Vexthor said quietly. "This is surveillance." The implications spread through the bridge crew like ice water. Someone was watching them. Someone had technology that exceeded their own. Someone had been gathering intelligence on their military capabilities for 3 full cycles without being caught. Within the hour, the matter reached the Krathon Supreme Council. Fleet Admiral Drexgarn presented the findings to the assembled leaders of the Empire, his voice carrying the weight of genuine concern for the first time in his long career. "We face an unknown threat," he told the council. "An entity with technology that exceeds our detection capabilities has been operating within our borders for 3 standard cycles." Grand Executor Zelvax, the supreme leader of the Krathon Empire, leaned forward in his seat. His age showed in the weathered plates of his exoskeleton, but his mind remained as sharp as ever. "What do we know about this entity?" "Nothing, Grand Executor. We have only the sensor readings of spatial distortions. No visual confirmation. No communication intercepts. No engine signatures. Whatever this vessel is, it operates on principles we do not understand." The council chamber filled with the clicking sounds of agitated Krathon discussing the matter among themselves. This was unprecedented. The Empire had fought wars against dozens of species over the millennia. They had crushed rebellions and destroyed entire civilizations that dared to resist. But always they had understood their enemy. Always they had held the advantage in technology and numbers. "I propose we dispatch a battle group to intercept this vessel," Drexgarn continued. "We must discover who they are and what they want." Zelvax considered this for a long moment. "Do it, but take no aggressive action unless they prove hostile. We do not know what we face." The fleet admiral bowed his head in acknowledgement. Within 6 hours, 12 of the Empire's most powerful warships departed for the Helvian Nebula, where the distortion was predicted to appear next. Each vessel carried enough firepower to reduce a planet to ash. Together, they represented one of the most formidable concentrations of military power ever assembled by the Krathon Empire. But on the bridge of the vessel they sought, Captain Daniel Hayes of the human stealth ship HSS Ranger watched their approach with calm interest. He had been expecting this. The Ranger had been built in the orbital shipyards above Earth 20 years earlier, part of humanity's deep space reconnaissance program. Her hull absorbed or deflected every known form of sensor radiation. Her engines produced no detectable emissions. Her crew of 42 operated under strict protocols designed for one purpose: to observe alien civilizations without being detected. For 200 years, humanity had followed this policy. After achieving faster-than-light travel, they had discovered they were far from alone in the galaxy. They had also discovered that most spacefaring species were aggressive, territorial, and quick to violence. So Earth made a decision. They would watch. They would learn. They would remain hidden until they understood the threats around them. Captain Hayes had served in the reconnaissance fleet for 15 years. He had observed 12 different alien civilizations during that time. The Krathon Empire was the most dangerous he had encountered. Their military might was staggering, their expansion relentless. For 3 months, he had been gathering data on their fleet movements, weapons capabilities, and strategic deployments. He had not intended to be detected. The Ranger's stealth systems were designed to prevent exactly that. But sensor technology improved, and even the best camouflage had its limits. "Captain, we have 12 Krathon warships approaching our position," Lieutenant Lisa Morgan reported from the communications station. She was young, only 28, but she had proven herself during their previous assignments. "They are moving into a standard intercept formation." "How long until they reach us?" Hayes asked. 18 minutes at current speed." Commander Jake Peters looked up from the tactical station. He was the ship's weapons officer, a veteran of the Mars Defense Force before joining the reconnaissance program. "Their weapons are charged and ready. They are treating this as a military operation." Hayes sat back in his chair, considering his options. He could run. The Ranger could jump to hyperspace and disappear before the Krathon fleet got close. But that would only delay the inevitable. If the Krathon had detected them once, they would do so again. And the next time they might send 100 ships instead of 12. The other option was to make contact, to reveal themselves and attempt communication. It went against every protocol he had been trained to follow, but Hayes had read the intelligence reports. He understood the Krathon mindset. They respected strength. They feared the unknown. Right now they did not know what they faced. That uncertainty was humanity's greatest weapon. "Maintain stealth protocols," he ordered. "Let them get close. I want to see what they do." On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, High Commander Vexler watched as his fleet moved into position around the predicted location of the anomaly. The ships formed a sphere 200 kilometers in diameter, their sensors scanning every cubic meter of space within that volume. "Increase sensor resolution to maximum," he commanded. "I want to know if so much as a dust particle moves in that space." Science Officer Kellenes worked at her station, adjusting the sensor parameters. "Commander, we are detecting the spatial distortion. It is directly ahead, distance 40 kilometers. Visual, nothing. Whatever is there, it does not reflect light in any detectable spectrum." Vexler felt a chill run through his body. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered anything that could hide so completely. Even the most advanced cloaking systems left some trace. Heat signatures. Gravitational distortions. Something. But this vessel, if it was a vessel, showed nothing. "Broadcast on all frequencies," he ordered. "Demand immediate identification and surrender." The communications officer complied, sending the message in every language known to the Krathon Empire. The response came faster than expected. On the Ranger, Lieutenant Morgan turned to Captain Hayes. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Krathon fleet. They are demanding we identify ourselves and surrender immediately." Hayes nodded slowly. "Send them a response. Tell them we are a scientific research vessel from the Human Confederation. Tell them we mean no harm and request permission to depart peacefully." "Should we decloak, sir?" "Not yet. Let us see how they react to words first." The message reached the Eternal Dominion seconds later. When Vexler heard the translated words, he felt his primary hearts begin to beat faster. Humans. He had never heard of such a species. The Empire's extensive database of known civilizations contained no reference to any confederation of humans. "Search all records for any mention of humans or a human confederation," he commanded. The wait lasted only moments. "No records found, Commander. This species is unknown to us." Vexthor made his decision. An unknown species with advanced stealth technology operating in Empire space without permission. The law was clear. Charge all weapons. If they do not reveal themselves and surrender within 60 seconds, open fire. On the Ranger, Commander Peters watched his tactical display as every Krathon ship in the fleet began powering up weapons systems. "Captain, they are preparing to fire. Plasma cannons, missile batteries, everything." Engineer Nicole Grant spoke from her station near the engine controls. "Sir, if we decloak now, we can bring shields to full power before they fire. The stealth systems draw too much energy to run defensive shields simultaneously." Hayes looked at the countdown on his display. 45 seconds until the Krathon opened fire. He had hoped for a different outcome, but some species only understood one language. "Decloak the ship," he ordered quietly. "Bring shields to maximum, prepare evasive maneuvers." The transformation happened in an instant. One moment, the Krathon fleet surrounded empty space. The next, a vessel appeared before them like a ghost becoming solid. The Ranger was 300 meters long, her hull a dark gray that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her design was unlike anything in Krathon experience, smooth and angular where their ships were jagged and brutal. On the Eternal Dominion, every officer on the bridge stood frozen for a moment, staring at the main display. They had expected many things, but not this. Not a vessel that appeared from nothing, as if conjured by magic. Vexthor recovered first. "All ships, open fire." 12 Krathon warships unleashed their weapons simultaneously. Plasma bolts bright enough to blind unshielded eyes lanced through space. Missiles accelerated to relativistic speeds, their warheads each carrying enough explosive power to destroy a city. Energy beams designed to cut through armor plating converged on a single target. The Rangers' shields flared blue as they absorbed the incoming fire. On the bridge, the lights dimmed momentarily as the defensive systems drew power from the main reactor. But when the bombardment ended and the weapon's fire faded, the human vessel remained intact. Not a single shot had penetrated the shields. "Shields at 87%, Nicole Grant reported, her voice steady despite the violence they had just endured. "All systems nominal." Hayes kept his eyes on the tactical display. "Evasive pattern Delta. Keep us moving. Do not return fire." The Ranger began to move, her engines pushing her through space with an agility that shocked the Krathon commanders. She weaved between incoming fire, her trajectory constantly changing in ways that made targeting impossible. The Krathon ships were powerful, but they were also large and slow, built for overwhelming firepower, not for dogfighting. "How are they doing this?" Vexthor demanded, watching in disbelief as shot after shot missed the human vessel. "That ship is a fraction of our size. It should not be able to maneuver like that." Kelani studied her readouts with growing amazement. "Their thrust-to-mass ratio exceeds anything in our fleet by a factor of 3, and their shield technology, Commander. I have never seen anything absorb that much energy without failure." For 12 minutes, the one-sided battle continued. The Krathon fleet poured fire into space, trying desperately to hit the elusive human ship. But the Ranger danced between their shots, her shields deflecting the few hits that connected. And through it all, she did not fire back. Not once. On the Ranger, Dr. Kevin Walsh worked at his science station, analyzing the Krathon weapons with intense focus. He was 45 years old, a physicist who had spent his entire career studying alien technology. Now he watched the data stream in, building a complete picture of how the Krathon weapons functioned. "Captain, I have identified a critical weakness in their plasma cannon design," he announced. "The magnetic containment field that shapes the plasma bolt has a resonance frequency. If we hit it with a precisely tuned energy pulse, we can disrupt the entire system." Hayes considered this information. He had been trying to avoid violence, trying to give the Krathon a chance to stand down. But they showed no sign of stopping. If anything, their fire was intensifying. He made his decision. Commander Peters, target the flagship's primary weapons array. Single shot, minimal power. I want to disable, not destroy. Aye, sir. Rail cannon charged and ready. The Ranger's main weapon was a magnetic accelerator, a rail gun that could launch a solid projectile at a significant fraction of light speed. It required no explosive warhead. At those velocities, the kinetic energy alone was devastating, but it could also be used with surgical precision. Fire! A streak of light crossed the distance between the Ranger and the Eternal Dominion in less than a second. The projectile, a tungsten rod no larger than a pencil, struck the flagship's forward weapons array with perfect accuracy. The impact triggered a cascade failure in the magnetic containment systems. In an instant, every plasma cannon on the front half of the ship went dark. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, alarms blared. Damage reports flooded in from every station. Vexthor stared at his tactical display in shock. Half his weapons were offline. The human vessel had fired exactly once, and with that single shot had crippled his flagship. Casualties? He asked quietly. None, Commander. The strike was precise. They targeted only our weapons systems. The meaning was clear. The humans could have destroyed his ship. They could have killed everyone on board. But they had chosen to disable instead. They had chosen mercy. Before Vexthor could issue new orders, another message arrived from the human vessel. This time Captain Hayes spoke directly, his voice calm and measured despite the violence of the past minutes. Krathon vessels, this is Captain Daniel Hayes of the human ship Ranger. We came to your space in peace, to observe and learn. You chose to interpret our presence as hostile. You chose violence without attempting communication. We have demonstrated that we could destroy your fleet if we wished. We have also demonstrated that we do not wish to do so. This is your final warning. Do not follow us. Do not attempt to locate us again. We will leave your territory and will not return, but if you force us to defend ourselves once more, we will not show the same restraint. The channel closed. On the Ranger, Hayes turned to his navigation officer. Plot a jump to coordinates Gamma 74. Maximum distance from Krathon space. Course laid in, Captain. Execute. Space around the Ranger twisted and bent as her faster-than-light drive engaged. In the span of a heartbeat, she vanished, leaving the Krathon fleet alone among the stars. Vexthor stood on his damaged bridge, staring at the empty space where the human vessel had been. Around him, his crew worked to restore damaged systems and assess the full extent of their losses. But the High Commander paid them no attention. His mind was focused on a single thought. For 3,000 years, the Krathon Empire had believed themselves to be the supreme military power in the galaxy. In 12 minutes, an unknown species had shattered that belief. They had demonstrated technology that exceeded anything the Empire possessed. They had shown tactical superiority, strategic thinking, and most disturbing of all, they had shown restraint. A species that could destroy but chose not to. A species that valued mercy over victory. Vexthor had fought against dozens of alien civilizations in his long career. He had never encountered anything like this. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he had just witnessed something that would change the Empire forever. The question was whether his superiors would understand that, or whether their pride would lead them down a path that could only end in disaster. The emergency session of the Krathon Supreme Council convened within hours of Fleet Admiral Drexkarn's return to the capital world. The council chamber, a massive dome carved from black stone, held the most powerful individuals in the Empire. 200 council members sat in ascending tiers, their attention focused on the Admiral as he stood before them. Grand Executor Zelvax occupied the highest seat, his ancient form draped in the ceremonial armor of his office. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber with the weight of 3 centuries of rule. Fleet Admiral, you have requested this emergency session. Explain what has occurred. Drexkarn stepped forward, his bearing straight despite the weight of his report. Grand Executor, honored council members, 12 hours ago our fleet engaged an unknown vessel in the Helvian Nebula. The vessel identified itself as belonging to a species called humans. They possess technology that exceeds our own in multiple critical areas. A wave of clicking and chittering spread through the chamber. Council members leaned toward each other, discussing this revelation in urgent tones. Zelvax raised one of his forearms, demanding silence. "How much superior is their technology?" the Grand Executor asked. "They possess stealth capabilities that render them invisible to our sensors. Their shields absorbed a sustained bombardment from 12 warships without failure. Their weapons disabled the Eternal Dominion's primary weapons array with a single shot. And their maneuverability exceeds anything in our fleet." The chamber erupted into chaos. Council members shouted questions and accusations. Some demanded to know how the military could have failed so completely. Others questioned whether the admiral was exaggerating the threat. Through it all, Zelvax remained silent, his compound eyes fixed on Drexkarn. Finally, the Grand Executor spoke again. "Did they destroy any of our ships?" "No, Grand Executor. They could have destroyed the entire fleet. Instead, they disabled our weapons and withdrew. They stated they came in peace and warned us not to follow them." This admission brought a different kind of silence to the chamber. It was one thing to face a superior enemy. It was another to face an enemy who showed mercy. The Krathon Empire had built its power on overwhelming force. They did not understand restraint in victory. Intelligence Director Morthes stepped forward from his seat in the lower tier. He was younger than most council members, barely 150 years old, but his mind was sharp and calculating. "Grand Executor, I have been analyzing all available data on this human species. Our intelligence networks have found limited information, but what we have discovered is revealing. Human space consists of only 17 colonized star systems. Their total population is estimated at fewer than 30 billion individuals. By every measure, they are a minor power." Council member Trathkar, a military veteran who had led campaigns against 3 different species, rose from his seat. "Then they are vulnerable. 17 systems cannot stand against our empire. We should strike now before they have time to prepare." Voices of agreement rose from multiple sections of the chamber. The council saw an opportunity. A small nation with advanced technology that could be conquered and absorbed. The benefits were obvious. If the Empire could capture even a few human vessels intact, they could reverse engineer the technology and maintain their dominance for another millennium. Science Officer Kellenes, who had been granted the rare privilege of addressing the council after her analysis of the human vessel, stood to speak. "Grand Executor, I must counsel caution. We do not know the full extent of human capabilities. The vessel we encountered may not represent their best technology. If they have chosen to remain hidden for so long, there may be strategic reasons we do not understand." Trathkar dismissed her concerns with a wave of his arm. "They ran. They had superior technology, and they chose to flee rather than fight. That is not the behavior of a confident military power. That is the behavior of a species that knows they cannot win a real war." The argument continued for another hour. Voices rose and fell as council members debated the proper course of action. Some advocated for diplomacy, for attempting to establish peaceful relations with this new species, but they were outnumbered by those who saw only opportunity, the chance to claim advanced technology, the chance to eliminate a potential future threat before it could grow stronger. Finally, Grand Executor Zelvax made his decision. "The humans have violated our territory. They have spied on our military installations. They have damaged our vessels. These actions cannot go unanswered. If we show weakness now, every minor species in the galaxy will think they can defy us." He paused, letting his words settle over the chamber. "Fleet Admiral Drexkarn, you will assemble an armada of 340 warships. You will proceed to human space and deliver our terms. Complete surrender, immediate transfer of all stealth and shield technology, and acceptance of Krathon's sovereignty over all human worlds. If they refuse, you will crush their civilization and take what we need by force." Drexkarn felt a cold weight settle in his core. 340 ships. It was more than they had sent against any enemy in 200 years. It was a fleet designed to destroy entire civilizations. But as he looked at the faces of the council members, he saw only determination and greed. They had made their choice. "As you command, Grand Executor," he said, bowing his head. As the council session ended and the members filed out of the chamber, Kellenes approached the fleet admiral. "Sir, I fear we are making a grave mistake. The humans showed restraint when they could have destroyed our fleet. That speaks to either great wisdom or great confidence, perhaps both." Drexgarn looked down at the young science officer. "I share your concerns, but the decision has been made. All we can do now is prepare for what comes next." Over the next 6 days, the largest Krathon war fleet in 2 centuries assembled at the edge of Empire space. 340 warships gathered in formation, each one bristling with weapons and carrying thousands of soldiers. The combined firepower represented enough destructive capability to reduce planets to lifeless rocks. When the fleet departed for human space, it did so with the full confidence of inevitable victory. They did not know that humanity had been preparing for this moment for 200 years. The HSS Ranger emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system exactly 4 hours after the encounter with the Krathon fleet. Captain Daniel Hayes immediately transmitted his report to Earth Defense Command, knowing that his words would trigger response protocols that had been planned for decades. Within the command center, buried deep beneath the Rocky Mountains, Admiral Christine Parker read the report 3 times. She was 60 years old, a career officer who had spent her entire adult life preparing for the day when humanity's hiding would end. Now that day had arrived. "Colonel Bennett, activate Contingency Plan Omega," she said calmly. Colonel Andrew Bennett, her Strategic Operations Director, began issuing orders to stations throughout the command center. Within minutes, encrypted signals went out to every human military installation in settled space. Ships that had been hiding for years received activation codes. Weapons systems that had never been fired outside of testing ranges powered up. Soldiers who had trained their entire lives for a war that might never come received deployment orders. "Admiral, all reconnaissance vessels are reporting in," Major Samantha Cole announced from the intelligence station. "We have 17 stealth ships positioned throughout the solar system, 18 if you count the Ranger." Parker nodded. 18 ships, not nearly enough to fight a conventional battle against a major power, but humanity had never planned to fight conventionally. "How long until they find us?" "Based on Captain Hayes' report and our intelligence on Krathon fleet movements, we estimate 7 to 10 days. They will need time to assemble a large enough force to feel confident. Then we have 7 days to finish our preparations. Make sure every ship is in position. Make sure every weapon system is calibrated. And make sure every crew member understands what we are about to do." The week passed with the steady rhythm of military preparation. Ships moved into carefully calculated positions throughout the solar system. Weapons were tested and retested. Tactical simulations ran continuously, preparing commanders for every possible scenario. And through it all, the 18 stealth vessels waited in silence, invisible to any sensor technology in known space. On the 8th day, the Krathon Armada arrived. They emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, 340 warships arranged in a formation that had crushed civilizations for millennia. Their sensors immediately detected the human presence. A single planet, third from the star, showing clear signs of advanced civilization, orbital stations, satellite networks, cities covering significant portions of the landmasses. Fleet Admiral Drexgarn stood on the bridge of his flagship, a massive dreadnought called the Fist of Empire. Around him, his command staff worked at their stations with practiced efficiency. They had done this before. They knew how such operations proceeded. "Broadcast our demands on all frequencies," he ordered. "Give them 1 standard hour to respond." The message went out, translated into the human language they had captured from the Ranger's transmission. The terms were simple and absolute: surrender, submit, or face annihilation. On Earth in the command center, Admiral Parker listened to the Krathon ultimatum with her command staff. When it finished, silence filled the room. "They learned nothing from the Helvian Nebula incident," Colonel Bennett observed quietly. "No," Parker agreed. "They saw restraint and mistook it for weakness. They saw mercy and thought it meant we could not fight. They are about to learn the truth." She turned to Major Cole. "Send the activation signal. All vessels prepare to decloak on my command." Signal sent, Admiral. Parker activated her communication link to the fleet. This is Admiral Parker to all vessels. You have trained your entire careers for this moment. You know what is at stake: our families, our world, our species. The Krathon Empire came here expecting easy prey. Show them what happens when you mistake human patience for human weakness. Show them what happens when you threaten everything we love. All ships, execute attack pattern Omega. Light them up. On the bridge of the Fist of Empire, the first indication of disaster came from the sensor station. The officer there stared at her display in confusion, then horror. Fleet Admiral, we are detecting massive spatial distortions throughout the system. Multiple contacts appearing simultaneously. Drexgarn felt his blood turn cold. How many contacts? 18, sir, decloaking in three-dimensional formation around our fleet. The main display shifted to show the tactical situation. 18 human vessels had appeared from nothing, arranged in a perfect sphere around the Krathon Armada. Each ship occupied a precise position calculated to provide maximum firing solutions. They had been there all along, invisible and waiting, and now they had sprung the trap. All ships, battle formation Omega. Drexgarn commanded, trying to reorganize his fleet, but even as he gave the orders, he knew they were too late. The humans had chosen their moment perfectly. The Krathon fleet was still in transit formation, designed for efficient travel rather than combat. On the HSS Ranger, Captain Daniel Hayes watched his tactical display with satisfaction. After the Helvian Nebula incident, he had been recalled to Earth and given command of the entire fleet for this operation. He knew the Krathon mindset. He knew how they would respond, and he had planned accordingly. All ships, commence attack. Target command vessels and communications arrays. Disable, do not destroy unless necessary. Lieutenant Brandon Foster, who had been transferred to the Ranger as tactical coordinator for the fleet, began designating targets across his display. His analysis over the past week had identified every weakness in Krathon fleet doctrine, every vulnerability in their command structure, every point where a precise strike would cause maximum disruption. 18 human warships opened fire simultaneously. Rail-gun projectiles crossed millions of kilometers of space in seconds. Energy beams designed for surgical precision struck their targets with perfect accuracy. Missiles accelerated to combat speed, their guidance systems locked onto critical systems. The first wave of strikes hit the Krathon fleet like a hammer. Command ships lost their communications arrays. Flagship bridges went dark as power systems failed. Weapons platforms that had terrorized dozens of species found themselves disabled before they could fire a shot. On the Fist of Empire, chaos erupted. Damage reports flooded in from every section of the ship. Drexgarn tried to issue commands, but his communications system was offline. He could not coordinate with his other vessels. He could not organize a defense. He could only watch as his carefully assembled armada fell apart around him. All ships, emergency broadcast on backup channels, he shouted. Return fire, target those vessels. Some ships received the order. Some managed to bring their weapons to bear on the human vessels. But the coordination that had made the Krathon military so effective for millennia was gone. Individual ships fired at targets of opportunity, their shots uncoordinated and desperate. The human ships moved through the chaos with practiced precision. Engineer Nicole Grant had modified the shield systems on every vessel in the fleet, increasing their efficiency by 30%. The Krathon weapons that had seemed so powerful in the Helvian Nebula now barely registered on the human ship's defensive systems. 8 minutes into the battle, the situation became clear to every commander in the Krathon fleet. They were losing. Not gradually, not after a hard-fought struggle, but completely and utterly. Their superior numbers meant nothing when their command structure had been destroyed. Their powerful weapons meant nothing when they could not hit their targets. Ships began to break formation, some trying to retreat, others attempting desperate attacks. The human vessels responded with cold efficiency. Engines were disabled, weapons systems destroyed. Life support remained intact. The humans were not trying to kill, they were trying to prove a point. On the bridge of the HSS Defiant, Admiral Parker watched the battle unfold across her displays. The Defiant was the newest and largest vessel in the human fleet, designed specifically for fleet command. From her position at the heart of the formation, she could see everything. "Admiral, we have disabled 73 Krathon vessels," Colonel Bennett reported. "Another 112 have suffered critical damage to weapons or propulsion. The rest are attempting to retreat." Time elapsed. 11 minutes 30 seconds. Parker allowed herself a small smile. 11 minutes to break the largest Krathon war fleet assembled in 2 centuries. That would send a message. "All ships cease fire, let them go." "Admiral," Bennett questioned, "we have them beaten. We could destroy the entire fleet." "Yes, we could, but that is not the goal. We need survivors to carry our message back to the Krathon Empire. We need them to understand what happened here." Activated the fleet-wide communication channel. "Krathon vessels, this is Admiral Christine Parker of the Human Defense Forces. You came to our home with overwhelming force. You demanded our surrender. You threatened to destroy our civilization. And now you have learned the truth. We did not hide among the stars because we were weak. We hid because we hoped we would never need to demonstrate our strength. We valued peace over conquest. We valued life over victory. But you gave us no choice." She paused, letting her words reach every surviving Krathon vessel. "You may leave now. Return to your empire. Tell them what happened here. Tell them that humanity will not be conquered. Tell them that we could have destroyed you all but chose not to. Tell them that if they want peace, we will talk. But if they want war, we will give them a war they cannot win. The choice is theirs." The communication ended. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the surviving Krathon vessels began to withdraw. Some limped away on damaged engines. Others were towed by their companions. Within an hour, the entire armada had retreated to the edge of the system and jumped to hyperspace. On the Fist of Empire, Fleet Admiral Drexgarn sat in his damaged command chair and tried to process what had occurred. 340 warships, the pride of the Krathon military, defeated in less than 12 minutes by 18 vessels. It was beyond humiliation. It was beyond disaster. It was the end of everything the Empire had believed about itself. Science Officer Kellenes approached him carefully. She had been transferred to the flagship before the mission, her expertise deemed necessary for analyzing human technology. Now she had witnessed the truth of human capabilities firsthand. "Fleet Admiral, we need to analyze what happened here. The humans demonstrated capabilities far beyond what we encountered in the Helvian Nebula. Their coordination, their tactics, their weapon systems, everything was designed for maximum efficiency." Drexgarn looked at her with tired eyes. "What is there to analyze? We attacked a superior force and paid the price, just as you warned we would. Sir, do you understand what this means? The humans have had this capability all along. They have been watching us for years, perhaps decades. They knew everything about us while we knew nothing about them. And when we forced their hand, they responded with overwhelming force tempered by mercy. That combination, that doctrine, it speaks to something we have never encountered before, a species that has mastered both war and peace." The journey back to Krathon space took 3 weeks. 3 weeks during which the survivors of the fleet had time to fully understand the magnitude of their defeat. 3 weeks during which word of what happened spread through communication channels to every corner of the Empire. When they finally arrived home, they found the Krathon Supreme Council in crisis. Grand Executor Zelvax had been removed from power by emergency vote. The council members who had most strongly advocated for the attack had been forced to resign, and in their place, a new leadership had emerged. Science Officer Kellenes found herself elevated to the council, her caution vindicated by events. The new Grand Executor was a moderate who had argued against the attack from the beginning. And the Empire's first priority was no longer expansion or conquest. It was survival. 6 months after the battle, Captain Daniel Hayes returned to the Helvian Nebula. This time, he was not alone. The Ranger led a small diplomatic flotilla, escorting Ambassador William Gray to a meeting with Krathon representatives. The negotiations took place on a neutral space station, a structure built centuries ago by a species long extinct. Hayes watched from the Ranger's bridge as the 2 delegations met face to face for the first time. Lieutenant Lisa Morgan stood beside him, monitoring the communication channels. It is strange, is it not? 6 months ago we were at war. Now we are negotiating trade agreements and technology exchanges. Hayes nodded slowly. The Krathon respect strength. We showed them strength, but we also showed them mercy. That combination is what made this possible. If we had destroyed their fleet, they would have fought us to the last warrior. By letting them live, we gave them the chance to choose a different path. Do you think it will last, the peace? I think it will last as long as we remain vigilant, as long as we maintain our strength, as long as we remember the lessons we have learned. We spent 200 years hiding because we feared war. Now we have shown the galaxy that we can wage war more effectively than any species they have encountered. But more importantly, we have shown them that we prefer peace. On the space station, Ambassador Gray and the Krathon representatives signed the treaty. It recognized human sovereignty over all 17 of their systems. It established trade relations and cultural exchanges. It created protocols for resolving future disputes through negotiation rather than violence. And most importantly, it acknowledged humanity as an equal power in the galaxy. As the ceremony concluded and both delegations departed, Hayes received a private communication from Science Officer Kellanes. It was brief and direct. Captain Hayes, the Krathon Empire has learned its lesson. We will not make the mistake of underestimating your species again. But I must ask you a question. You showed us mercy twice, once in the Helvian Nebula and once in your home system. Why? Our histories show no examples of such behavior from a victorious force. Hayes considered his response carefully before replying. Because we remember our own history. We remember the wars we fought among ourselves before we reached the stars. We remember the terrible cost of conflict. We learned that strength without wisdom leads only to destruction. We learned that victory without mercy creates only enemies. And we learned that the strongest civilizations are not those who can destroy their opponents, but those who can choose not to when they have the power. We showed you mercy because we hope that one day, when the situation is reversed, you will remember and do the same. There was a long pause before Kellanes responded. You are a strange species, Captain Hayes, but perhaps that is what the galaxy needs. Something different, something better. The communication ended. Hayes turned back to his crew, men and women who had trained their entire lives for war but hoped they would never need to fight. They had proven themselves in battle. They had demonstrated humanity's capabilities to a hostile galaxy, and now they could return to what they did best, watching, learning, waiting in the darkness of space, ready to defend their civilization if necessary but always hoping for peace. Set course for home, Hayes ordered. Our work here is done. The Ranger turned away from the space station and accelerated toward the edge of the system. Behind them, the galaxy continued on as it always had, but something fundamental had changed. Humanity had emerged from the shadows. They had revealed their strength, and in doing so, they had secured not just their own survival, but a chance for a better future for all species who chose cooperation over conquest. The unknown warship that had decloaked in the Helvian Nebula had become a legend, a story told across 1,000 worlds, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one you never see coming. And sometimes the greatest victory is the one that ends without a single unnecessary death.